to Andy Brantley, CUPA-HR President and CEO. Andy?
Thank you so much, Beth. And again, it is great to see all the faces from the Midwest Region Board and our chapters in the Midwest region. We're so glad that you are all with us today. I will say that this is our fourth of 4 regions in the last 2 days, and each event has just been absolutely outstanding in terms of the opportunity to connect and engage and to share. One of the things that we have been lamenting since July is that we did not have the opportunity to have our face-to-face ALP in lovely downtown Tempe, Arizona. But taking lemons and making lemonade, it has given us the opportunity to invite all of our chapter leaders and not just the 2 that we could afford to bring to Tempe. So this opportunity to connect and engage is just the start. I hope that you had the opportunity to join us last week for our kickoff event and our first stop, swap, and roll, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a couple of minutes. So it is my pleasure, as we get started, to introduce my colleague and my partner in crime this year, the chair of our national board and the vice president for human resources from Augusta University in Augusta, Georgia, Susan Norton. Susan, please offer a few words of welcome.
Thank you so much, Andy, and to each member of the Midwest Region Board and each of your chapter boards. I really want to extend a warm welcome to you. I also want to thank you for all that you are doing on your campuses as HR professionals, as we're facing things that we've never faced, and we continue to navigate and handle things and show resilience. And so my hat is off to each one of you, because I know, having to do it here, we are all in this together, and we've been able to persevere in ways that we probably never thought possible. So I am filled with gratitude. I'm filled with gratitude for you as colleagues. I'm filled with gratitude for CUPA-HR. CUPA-HR has been such an incredible organization for me professionally for 20 plus years. And I continue to be so impressed at the way that CUPA-HR can respond really to any given challenge. And this year has been the challenge of all challenges with COVID-19. And it's just amazed me in the way that the CUPA-HR National Office has managed to bring to bear online learning opportunities, spring conference, and then having to plan for ALP. I do miss that we are not together. This is always such an incredible event. The warmth that we feel when we're together as colleagues is just always, it just fills you up. I can just feel the feeling that I feel when I get to be with my CUPA-HR family and colleagues. So while I definitely miss that, the way our national office has pivoted to allow us to bring this type of event together so that you can still get together, we can still be with you. I'm just so grateful to them, because they have risen and risen again every single time they're faced with a difficulty. And so to Beth and Shona, just, hats off. So, and to Andy too, as the leader of this organization. So we're all a part of it. We get to be a part of CUPA-HR through our leadership roles. And so each one of you makes a difference in what you do, not only for your campuses, but for CUPA-HR. Andy mentioned last week's keynote. That was amazing. Shola Richards was absolutely outstanding. And his message of kindness and the importance of kindness in our workplaces just really resonated, I think, with so many of us, especially now. It's always important, but especially now. Another thing that he said, and I said in one of the sessions, but I haven't said in each of them, was the quote that he attributed to an African proverb, which was, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's really what CUPA-HR is all about. CUPA-HR is about bringing people together so we can go together and so that we advance together. And it's just the wonderful organization that it is, because we share. And so I'm offering my welcome to you. I'm offering my appreciation to you. I hope that you'll get out of this what you're seeking. I just appreciate your leadership now and throughout the course of this year as your regions and your chapters rely on you. Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be with you.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I could not ask for a better partner in crime as a leader of our board as we continue to navigate these very interesting times. Another quote that Shola shared with us last week was, "No single drop of rain believes it is responsible for the flood." Most of us hear this and think of it from a negative standpoint. I think of it from the exact opposite standpoint. That one raindrop, that one comment that we make, that one expression of gratitude, that one connection that we make with someone that really does cause that flood of connection, that flood of gratitude, that flood of acceptance of fill in the blank. And we have the opportunity to do that through our roles at CUPA-HR. So I hope that this year you think about the number of raindrops and the way that we're creating a flood across the country in spite of this COVID craziness. And I really do appreciate and value each and every one of you. Susan said that she was grateful for you. And that is also one of the key things that I want to share, just my gratitude for each and every one of you for what you're doing on your campuses. You know, we talk about CUPA-HR pivoting, but I've talked with many, many, many of you, and I know that that's kind of your daily mantra too, is, you know, what are we pivoting to do today? And I know that that is very much a part of your work, and also a part of your work as CUPA-HR leaders as we sustain this higher ed HR community. As I said in the stop, swap, and roll sessions last week, we know that HR can be a lonely and sometimes very stressful job. And I hope that you will use this opportunity as CUPA-HR leaders to lean on your colleagues and to also ask your colleagues to lean on you during these really crazy times. As region and chapter leaders, it's important now more than ever that we're conduits not just to our other leaders, but to other HR professionals around the country, and particularly in our areas of focus. We often think of our work primarily as creating virtual events. Now I put virtual events, but it's also even more important that we think about our roles as those connectors with our colleagues across the country. We all need encouragement and we all need support. I also encourage you to find ways to informally connect with your colleagues, particularly the other leaders that you work with, either as part of the region board or as part of your chapter boards. We have important work to do, but it's also really important that we create these opportunities and these bonds to get to know our colleagues beyond their campus roles and responsibilities. Here's a great example. So over 20 years ago, probably closer to 30, I met Susan Norton for the first time through a CUPA-HR event. Little then did I know that we would go on to be not just great colleagues, but lifelong friends. And through this, there are certain things that I know because we have become such great friends. She knows I'm going to say all these things, so she's ready. First, Susan was born one day before me. So that makes her older than me, but I still can't explain how I look several years older than her. Just kind of happens that way. Susan and I both have sons. They all four played soccer. Hers were soccer phenoms. Mine were second stringers on the bench, but we all enjoyed that whole soccer mind frame when our kids were younger. So very much a connection there. In addition to our connections through CUPA-HR, when I was the head of HR at the University of Georgia, Susan and I were also partners in crime as we blew up a very old, antiquated classification system that was being forced upon us by the university system. So we were partners in crime as we created something that made much more sense to the university system. And also, if you didn't know, Susan is not the only member of her family who is in higher ed. In fact, her sister Caroline is the chief HR officer at the University of South Carolina. So definitely a small world. And I share that just to emphasize not only what great friends and colleagues that Susan and I are, but that I hope that you find your Susan, or that you find your Andy, or your Heather, or your Shanna, or your Darren, or your Kelly, or whomever through this CUPA-HR experience, because it really is so much about how we connect with individuals that is so critically important to our work. So thank you for that. So let's do some other introductions. So this event would not be possible without the support of our corporate partners, TIAA, Cornerstone, PageUp, Higher Ed Jobs, and Voya. And as those of you who have been around CUPA-HR for a while know, Siegel has been the flagship sponsor of the association leadership program, and now our leader experience for the last for many years, as a matter of fact. And I'm so pleased for the support of Kelly Jones and his colleagues around the country. And Kelly, I welcome you now and ask you to unmute and say a few words of welcome to our Midwest colleagues.
Thanks, Andy. It sure is a pleasure to be with you all, and it's great to see your faces. You know, something we've been missing. You know, I wanted to build on Andy's and Susan's thoughts about lifelong friends. To me, that's been maybe the most rewarding part of my experience in working with CUPA-HR and in higher ed for all these years. Lifelong friends, you know, I look at the gallery view of this group and I know practically all of you, and that says an awful lot about how close we've been able to come together. And it's been true of all of the regions that have had their sessions prior to yours this week already. You know, Andy and I go way back. We won't tell stories about that so much, except that I remember the day, I know exactly where I was sitting when I got a call in my office. And Andy asked me whether or not I thought he should take the mantle of CEO and president of CUPA-HR. Was that a terrible move? And I told him absolutely not. And here we are, I don't know how many years later, 12, 13?
15.
15.
Yes.
Well, it's been an unbelievable success story, not only for the association, but for all of us. And Andy, you've done us very proud, and I'm so happy you decided to take that role. Siegel, of course, has been the proud sponsor of this for a long time, the proud sponsor of a lot of things. My colleagues and I, who are also on the call today, really just enjoy our relationships, our work together. It really tickles me when I talk to some of the folks at Siegel who maybe haven't done quite as much higher ed work, and they're all clamoring to try to get put on a project at an institution somewhere, because all they hear about is how great it is to work with y'all. So the togetherness thing is really important, and I look forward to a great session that you guys have today. And hopefully, although we're not able to hug each other and be together, this will be equally as effective. And so I hope we have a great day today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And yes, Kelly was one of those individuals that I called and said, well, what do you think if I kind of went in this direction? And the 15 years have flown, and every day, every week, every month seems like a new experience, because we are growing and we're changing and we're transforming, thanks to each and every one of you. Before I move on to the next topic, one thing I forgot to mention earlier with regard to Shola is that in the next week or so, we did record the presentation that Shola shared with us last week. We will be sending that to all of our region and chapter leaders for you to use as an individual, for you to use with your teams and on your campus. We do ask that you not broadcast it to the masses. He does do this for a living. So we kind of keep that in perspective, but please feel free to use it with your teams, because I think that's such a powerful message, and look forward to hearing your experiences with your teams. So moving on, our next topic is to actually talk about CUPA-HR's Chapter Excellence Award. As you guys know, it really does represent chapters that are making a significant impact through their commitment to the association. The recipient last year from the Midwest region was the Kansas chapter, and I am thrilled to let people know, if you don't already know, if you haven't seen their backgrounds, our Minnesota chapter colleagues received this year's Midwest Region Chapter Excellence Award, and we are thrilled that they receive this very important acknowledgement that's very well deserved. As part of this, we asked our reps from the Minnesota chapter to share one of their success stories with us to kind of get us going today. And I believe Jacqueline from St. Olaf is going to share on behalf of her Minnesota colleagues. So Jacqueline, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Great, thanks, Andy. The Minnesota chapter is very proud to have been recognized with this award. And I just wanted to start by providing a little bit of background before we actually get to the particular item, because I must tell you that 3 years ago, the CUPA-HR board was in a very different place than we are today. At that time, we were still having highly successful spring conferences with over 100 attendees, yet the board consisted of just a small but mighty handful of members and only a few key sponsors. So at that time, we actually set out to double the size of the board. And we did that by doing a pretty strong pitch at our spring conference that included describing the volunteer opportunities available. We defined the time and sort of the role expectations, and also presented the development and scholarship opportunities that are available to our Minnesota chapter board members. And actually our next step was then to interview those prospective board members, because we actually had more people volunteer than board positions available. And so then we actually had to select them based upon their personal motivations, available commitment level, and we also wanted a wide variety of institutions on our board as well. And then once our board was in place, we really had to go to work. We enhanced our Minnesota chapter by building off that solid foundation that we already had in place. But we tightened up our financial protocols from there, and we built a reserve. We further refined our board roles and expectations. We revamped our website. We also held a day-long retreat. Speaking of connections that you and Susan mentioned earlier, Andy, our board is really collaborative and a very engaged group who really genuinely enjoy spending time together. And so we had a great day-long retreat, but one of the outcomes that we're probably most proud of is that we created a new Minnesota chapter mission statement as well. And then last, but certainly not least, we worked on really increasing our vendor sponsorships. And we did this by looking at all of our vendor relationships that we already had in place with our board member institutions for benefits, retirements, consulting, training, and we began leveraging those relationships in support of Minnesota, the chapter in Minnesota. And so what we quickly learned was all you have to do is respectfully ask. Maybe Kelly can speak to that. As many vendors already have budgets established for this type of sponsorship. And so we also learned, though, just ask in the October-November timeframe when they're setting up those sponsorship budgets for the coming year. But we really had success in this area. So fast forward to our 2019 spring conference, and we actually quadrupled the number of our sponsors. So a huge success. So things were going great. However, when I began my chapter presidency in July 2019, I was faced with kind of a unique dilemma. The timing of our regular Minnesota chapter spring conference and the April 2020 Midwest West Regional Conference, they were to be hosted both in Minnesota, and they were falling too close together. And so after discussing our options and much consternation, a few prayers on my part, we actually decided not to offer our Minnesota 2020 spring conference, and then just simply strongly encouraged all of our chapter member participants to join the regional conference. So then instead, we actually decided to hold a 2019 fall event that provided another opportunity to bring our state's HR community together. And to do so, we actually partnered with one of our gold sponsors, Mercer, who graciously hosted the first ever HR Strategic Summit. It was in October of 19, and it was held in downtown Minneapolis. Mercer was actually looking for an opportunity to expand its higher ed market business, and was actually thrilled to support our event. So that was awesome. And they made it super easy on our board. They provided the location. They took care of the registration process. They brought in lunch, they flew in speakers, and they even treated us to a fabulous happy hour afterwards. So no complaints from our end, for sure. And then our board actually got to sort of determine the content of the Strategic Summit, and then Mercer provided the 3 speakers to present on the topics that they actually geared for higher ed. So those topics were talent trends, impact on total reward strategy, gender pay and opportunity equity, HR transformation and technology enablement for the future of work. So 3 great strategic topics. And while we really didn't know what to expect, we actually met our maximum registration, our room capacity basically. And we had a mix of attendees from various private and public colleges from around the state. And the sessions were really well received. I mean, overall, the fall event was a huge success, and we're actually planning to replicate it again this year, virtually, of course. And Mercer is happy to be supporting us again. So it all worked out really well. We really felt like our strategic summit aligned well with the CUPA-HR strategic priority of creating and delivering learning and development resources to enable excellence and success for higher ed HR professionals and institutions. And so we really felt like that strategic summit met that goal. And now we're hosting, or going to continue to host, 2 events each year. So at this time, Amanda, the current president, and I are happy to take your questions regarding the strategic summit or any of the board enhancement items that I mentioned.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. You and your Minnesota colleagues have definitely incorporated so many elements that are critically important to business continuity and the continuity of leadership and engagement. And the model that you just shared, I think is so important. I also know that, you know, our sponsors that are here with us today, I know that Kelly and his colleagues from Siegel also do similar work with many of our chapters. And I also know that TIAA, Cornerstone, Page Up, Higher Ed Jobs, and Voya Financial also do a great job of supporting our chapters around the country. So again, as Jacqueline was indicating, please reach out with a compelling ask that makes sense for your chapter and what you're trying to do. So again, congratulations and thank you for all of your incredible work on behalf of CUPA-HR and the Minnesota chapter. As Susan and I plan our transition to fade into the woodwork here, we're ready to turn over the program to our awesome Midwest Region Board. So thanks to Darren, Heather, Connie, and the rest of our awesome Midwest Board for all that you are doing as you continue to pivot and work with not just our chapters, but our national board and our other initiatives around the country. And now it's my understanding that I turn the program over to Shanna Legleiter from Kansas State University, who will be the facilitator for the next segment of the program. So Shanna, I turn the program over to you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Susan. And thanks again to the Minnesota chapter. After your overview, Jacqueline, I can see why you all were selected to receive the Chapter Excellence Award. So once again, congratulations. That is super. And I know I echo Susan's comments when I say that I miss seeing you all and I miss the energy of ALP, but at the same time, I am super grateful for a virtual space such as this, to where we can at least see one another's faces, we can see the whites of our eyes and be able to connect in a different way, which has probably been most of our worlds here lately. So I'm very thankful for CUPA-HR for just pivoting as they do so well and allowing us to have this space. I'm not going to take too much time with introductions, but I do think it's important to just introduce our Midwest Region Board. And I think most of you have probably seen them or at least know who they are if you're joining our chapter Zoom calls once a month, which has kicked off to a great start. Please do continue to do that. And we're super excited to keep those going throughout the academic year as well. But I'm just going to kick off, and if you are on, which I think all of the Midwest Region folks are on, just give a shout out and say a quick hello. So I'm going to kick off with Darren Hoff. He's our chair. He's our fearless leader, and he's on my screen waving. And I think Darren gets the award for the longest title. He's the Affiliate External Service Provider Lecturer, Human Resources Director at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and the Minnesota Department of Administration. Darren, thanks for being our fearless leader.
Thank you. It's always pleasure to be here and seeing everyone's face.
Nice. And then we have Connie Putland, who is serving as our chair-elect. Hello, Connie. She's our Assistant Chief Human Resource Officer at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Next, we have Heather Hart, who is our past chair, our past fearless leader. She's the executive director of HR at Ivy Tech Community College of Indiana Lafayette.
And so happy to be here and see so many familiar and smiling faces. I miss everyone, but good to see everyone.
And I'm sorry, I didn't unmute fast enough. Good to see everyone. Welcome.
And then we have Renee Hiller. Renee serves as our national board representative. She's the director of HR at Michigan Technological University.
Hi, everyone. Glad to see everyone.
And next we have Ruth Appleton, who serves as one of our at-large members. She's an HR specialist at Iowa State.
Hi, everybody. Great to see everyone. Love CUPA. Have a great day.
And next we have Jake Lathrop. He's an at-large member. He's a consultant to the executive vice president at Michigan State University.
Hey everyone, great to see you all. Great to be here. Like everyone else, I wish it was in person, but this is absolutely better than nothing, and it's so good to see your faces.
Wonderful. And then we have Justin Lacey, another at-large member. He's the assistant director of diversity, equity, and inclusion and the Title IX coordinator at the University of Illinois System.
Hey everybody, great to see everybody. It's going to be some great discussions today, so glad you're able to join us. Welcome.
So that rounds out our Midwest Region Board introductions. So hopefully those are all familiar faces that you are all in tuned to and know who we are. So now we're going to dive into some exciting discussion, and we are going to take turns. And so you'll see that I will be kind of navigating some of the discussion that takes place in this space, but the chat is still going, which is awesome. And so we are using the chat feature as well as we kind of navigate this. So please feel free to do what you're comfortable with. You can unmute yourself and speak up, or you can use the chat function too. If you'd rather chat with your responses to our questions around the different topics that we have, you can feel free to do what is best for you. So we have lots of people monitoring spaces, so please engage with us in any way that you want to. And I know this is an engaging group, so I'm excited and looking forward to that. So our Midwest Region Board got together and we tried to pre-select some topics that we thought would be really good for us to facilitate some conversation around certain topics. And the first topic that we chose happens to be our virtual events, because we know that many chapters have hosted some successful virtual events. And through the hosting of those, you've probably got down some really good best practices that you want to share, but you've probably also gained some lessons learned. And so maybe there's some things that you want to share that you're like, gosh, I really don't want anybody else to find out this pitfall the hard way, or I don't want anybody else to make this mistake. So we're going to spend a little bit of time just engaging around a couple of those different topics, and then we'll continue to move through some of the questions. So let's kind of start with some best practices for your virtual events. And anybody can feel free to unmute themselves, or you can raise your hand, use the chat feature. But what are some best practices that you've found out so far in this current time that you maybe like to share with others around virtual events? Jacqueline, go ahead.
Sure. One of the things that we've definitely learned is to do a dry run, or to have a practice session ahead of time to make sure the technology is working, people can get in, and do people as hosts, but also as participants, so that you can kind of just test all the technology, because I think that's the biggest hurdle, is just getting on able to talk and do your thing.
Love that suggestion. Absolutely. Because we all know that technology can be our friend, but other times not so much. So I agree. I think that's great. Good suggestion.
This is Natalie Trent from the Michigan chapter. To kind of piggyback off of that comment, one of the things that I've done on other events, not necessarily our chapter event, is build in some redundancies with the presentation. So if we have a presenter that's sharing their slides, having them share the slides with me as well ahead of the event, because if they get kicked off for some reason, then they can just jump on via phone call and join right back in. And then I can start sharing their slides wherever they left off, and we're not then stuck messing with technology kind of in the middle of it. So just things like that to build in those redundancies really is helpful too.
I love that idea, Natalie. I don't think you could ever be too careful or cautious to have a contingency plan when it comes to technology, especially with internet and limited bandwidth sometimes where people are joining from. So that's a great idea. I'm curious, Jacqueline and Natalie, when you did your events, did you use a platform like this with Zoom, or did you use something different?
Yeah, at Grand Valley, we have a Zoom license for the institution, and so everybody's kind of got their own that it's just built into our system. So it's been a great platform, and we have the version that includes, you know, the breakout rooms and the polling and all those pieces. So I find that quite user-friendly, but, you know, I've done other sessions on Teams as well. Microsoft Teams has been a good platform for us too, so.
Yeah, and we've done, same as Natalie, we've used the Google Meet as well as Zoom. So both of those. You have to just be careful with the Google Meet that you don't get too many participants, whereas the Zoom can allow for many more.
Oh, good tip. Okay. Awesome. What other best practices do you have out there for virtual events?
Shanna, this is Darren. One of the best practices that we have, and I directly support over 1,300 team members now and about 400 supervisors. And so we're doing a lot of training online. And one of the things that I have found, whether you're using Microsoft Teams or we use WebEx as well, is to have a different administrator from your moderator. So who's ever leading the conversation should have one person also watching the chat, which we do here today as well. But then also have a separate individual that is, if you're doing breakout rooms or so forth, you have to have that separate individual as the administrator from the moderator of the session.
Excellent tip.
I just wanted to add, this is Amanda from Minnesota, or U of M. So the breakout rooms, with different sessions that I've facilitated, participants are finding those to be very valuable. And we would recommend adding or allowing more time for those breakout rooms, because sometimes it takes folks a couple minutes or so to get acclimated, and then they start talking about the topic at hand. Then you're already rushing them back into the large group. So extra time for breakout rooms has been very valuable. And I've only used Zoom before.
Yeah, Amanda, we've done a lot of the breakout room stuff with the national office and various groups. And one, I think, thing that we've kind of learned is it's also helpful if you can kind of plant some volunteers in those different breakout rooms, that it helps to have somebody in there to sort of get the conversation going and kick off and encourage people to do that. So if you have some folks who are on your board or planning committee or whatever that can kind of lead those conversations, that's been really helpful for us in a lot of sessions.
I literally was thanking Shanna when we got started. I don't know if anyone noticed, but the power, our lights were flickering here in my office building, and I was like, oh man, I should have maybe had a backup. Like, you know, I was thinking of who would I text one of you in case I had no power when it comes to my section. So maybe having a backup would be a good idea.
I wanted to answer Kelly's question about when are we using Zoom. And so I work a lot with staff and faculty for leadership programs. And we've done a lot of programs with them. So it's mostly Zoom. I've also done a program for individual contributors around their leadership. And again, it's the same thing. So those Zooms are for leadership development programs.
There's an app that you can have people sign on to called Menti, M-E-N-T-I, on your smartphones. And that allows you to coordinate with a Zoom meeting, polling questions, Wordles, all sorts of different aspects that people answer on their phone, and then it shows up on the speaker screen or your screen with the results. And I am in no means an expert in it. Thankfully, I have people that do that for us. But it really does enhance the impact of a Zoom meeting as far as it being more interactive for everyone. I don't know if anyone on the call has used Menti or not. I know my colleague Catherine Lilly uses it all the time, and it's always very beneficial.
Has anybody else used Menti or something similar? Well, that'll give us something to check out. That's awesome. Great tools.
Jana, the other thing I was going to mention is to, you mentioned the chat, right, with all the questions and the comments. And to, I know as the moderator or the host, you can actually get a record of that so that you can have it for future. So if people are asking a bunch of questions and you're trying to get through all the questions and you know you can't hit them all and you're going to need to follow up after the session, you can actually get that record or keep that record. So I would also say that it's another best practice for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. A transcript of the chat is helpful.
So this is Stacy. I'm with the Iowa chapter. We've not held any virtual events, and so I'm just curious as to how you kind of kickstart a virtual event from a communications perspective, communicating the value of it being remote versus in person. Do you use the same type of timeline that you do planning for an in-person event? Things of that sort.
Excellent question. I can kind of share what we've done to pivot at K-State, at least a little bit, for some virtual events that we've had planned. Much like CUPA, we've followed a lot of what they've done, and rather than do maybe a continuous block of learning for some of our supervisory programming, we've lengthened it and spread it out over a variety of months rather than having it in blocks of time where people would maybe be in a room for 3 to 4 hours straight. We've actually made it to where we would break up a 4-hour training session into 2, and we'd have it within that same week, but we might have it on a Tuesday, Thursday within that same week. So they don't kind of lose that continuity of the learning, but then lengthen the session so it goes a little bit longer throughout the semester, or at least longer in the months. So it's not so much sitting. I think sometimes people get zoomed out. And so that's one thing that I think is a lesson that we've learned, is that people have like a very short attention span when it comes to Zoom, because this might be a learning opportunity, but then they're also doing Zoom meetings. And so to try to just balance that, I think, is something that we've tried to learn as well. I'm not sure what others have done though.
I just shared a quick timeline in the chat, and we have several other resources, Stacy, that might be helpful in the volunteer toolkit, including some like sample agendas and things like that kind of take into account, Shanna, what you were saying about the length of a virtual meeting, that you can't have people on Zoom for 4 hours straight like you would at an in-person. So it has some different kind of sample agendas that you might consider. And then that timeline, we really just took our in-person event planning timeline that has been out in the toolkit for a while and sort of adjusted and adapted to what we had been doing in the national office to kind of switch all of these events, and for like the regular webinars and stuff we had already been hosting. So you might find that helpful. And we really recommend, I would say, a month kind of minimum in terms of planning out to get all of the stuff coordinated. But in general, the process is largely the same. It's just sort of like, what are each of the steps in terms of when do you communicate, and hosting that dress rehearsal that people have mentioned. So those kinds of things are in that sample for you.
Great resources. Thanks, Julie. Anything else on best practices or lessons learned?
Stacy, I'll mention too, from some of the other chapters we've been hearing from. They've taken a different approach. So obviously not doing a half day or a full day conference, switching to a virtual. Some have done a lunch and learn where maybe it's just a 1 hour session that you hold at noon and invite people to bring their lunch. You have a topic of discussion. Maybe you have an expert or someone who could speak for a few minutes on it, and then the rest of the time you engage each other, talk about it, talk about how you're handling it on campus. Some chapters, the New York Metro, for instance, they're doing these essentially a happy hour at 5 o'clock, once a month, once every other month. Same concept, it's just an hour long. They find out from their chapter participants what things are pressing right now for them, what do they want to learn more about. And so the one I was able to join was really interesting. They had a general counsel from someone's institution join and did a quick review of their policies and procedures on wearing a mask on campus, or what do you do if faculty or staff refuse, going over how they were going to handle that. And then they opened up the second half of the meeting to everyone to discuss about it, ask questions. Both the lunch and learns and then the happy hours that I've joined seem to be really well attended. And then I also want to plug our corporate sponsors too. They have meeting platforms in place. They have speakers that can present on a variety of topics for you. They're great resources to turn to for assistance, especially when you're so overwhelmed right now with everything that's going on your campus. They're a great partner to step up and work with you and take some of that load off of you as well. And I'll share a little bit of the resources that we have in the toolkit towards the end that touch on the virtual event.
Thanks, Beth. That's very helpful. And I think it's probably a good time to pivot maybe to our next question that we had ready regarding the virtual events. And Jacqueline did a nice kickoff too about how we engage our corporate sponsors. And I know that it looks different than we would normally do in a traditional face-to-face event that would be maybe a half day, full day, or even 2 days long for the chapters. So we're asking, what types of ways have you engaged your corporate sponsors, and how are you collaborating with them during this time? Has anybody reached out to corporate sponsors to help sponsor events?
I was going to ask Kelly, has he noticed a change in communication from chapters this year from years past?
Yeah, so thank you for that. We've reached out to several chapters, including several in the Midwest, about doing a virtual sort of half-day thing, much like what Jacqueline was describing that they did in Minnesota. And I'm thinking that while everyone seems interested in these sorts of opportunities, everyone's got so much on their plate, especially with students coming back or not right now. The terrible state of flux we're all in, trying to decide, should we send them home if things are going bad? All of the stuff that you guys are dealing with, I think, has sort of overrun the psyche of how these things might otherwise have been helpful. So I think some of the silence that we just heard about, have you reached out to folks like us? We're certainly ready, willing, and able to do these kinds of things and help with presentations and any other number of events. I was thinking of doing a pizza party where you just got your own pizza and you called in, and you could feed your family, but you could also sit there and catch up with your friends, things like that. So I think we all are a little zoomed out because I don't know about you, but if you're on 3 or 4 of these a day and you've got kids at home, let's say, thankfully for me, we're beyond that stage. We have grandkids at home sometimes, but it's just hard. This is a hard time for everybody. And so I think organizing them is not as much of a priority, I think, for some folks as we would all like, because they've got so much else on their plate. But please understand, we're ready, willing, and able. It's just a matter of if you have the time and interest and think you can drum up the attendance.
I'll say from the Michigan chapter, we've actually had some of our sponsors or partners reach out to us and say, hey, we're offering this. And so all we've had to do is then push it to the membership through different posting avenues. And so that's been kind of nice that we don't have to actually think about it. They're saying, hey, here's the content. We're ready to deliver it. We're already doing this. Just share with your members. And so that's been a way that we've kind of engaged with them, but it's been more passive on our part, which I think Kelly spoke to the fact that we're all dealing with a lot right now. And so it's probably just one of those things that's getting pushed down the line of things to do on top of what our organizations are dealing with every day. So that engagement from our sponsors has been nice.
Yeah, we did a Title IX session for Michigan 2 months ago, let's say. And despite busyness, people are busy with that. So people needed to kind of hear what the latest requirements were. And I know Jake helped to socialize that in Michigan as well. So that's another way to go about some of these things.
And back many years ago with the Minnesota chapter, part of the sponsorship was to have, or the ability to host 2 webinars throughout the year. And I know Simpson back in the day had done a few for the Minnesota chapter as well. So not only are sponsors able to provide speakers, but oftentimes are able to provide the platform as well and to do the moderation. And so it does facilitate the conversation very well. And we're thankful for your participation in that as well.
Building on the hey, this is Joe from the Michigan chapter. Building on the platform comment. One of the other things that I've appreciated from when we've pushed the sponsor webinars has also been the recording function building off of that platform, because then we've been able to keep the record of past events on our sites, and so even if time doesn't allow for participants to connect day of, they can check out our archive, which then we're pushing the sponsored material, and then it's like a gift that keeps on giving.
That's a great idea.
This is Abby from the, sorry, Shannon, this is Abby from the Kansas chapter. We are finishing up finalizing our conference, and we did have success with getting some sponsors for it. So, kind of like you talked about earlier, just reaching out, that's all we did. We sent the email and we had people willing and ready to sponsor our sessions. It is a little different because like everyone else, we're doing virtual, but we gave them the opportunity to do some pre-recorded sessions that people can attend on their own time. We're going to do a live portion with a keynote, but this way people aren't sitting on Zoom for hours on end listening to people talk, and they're going to be able to get on at any point in time and access the pre-recorded sessions. So we'll see how that goes, but it's had a good response from the sponsors for it. So
I have a question. I don't know if Kelly can address this or someone else. I myself am loving remote life because I would drive 3 to 4 hours to attend our state conference. And it's allowing me to have access to a lot more events without having to leave and use a day and a half of my travel time. Are you finding that more, like you're getting more exposure to different areas than you would have before? Are you gaining, new potential clients or some good exposure from that? Or are people not logging on because of life as we know it being a little more hectic?
It's kind of interesting. It's a mixed bag. There are more people who are able to participate virtually because of what you just described, Maria, but and so we are seeing people who are getting to know us or whomever, for the first time, or maybe better than just knowing the name of Siegel or what have you. So we are getting a broader audience and a bigger audience, I think, than we would in in-person things. It certainly doesn't replace, you know, the nicety of being together in person, of course. But I think it's more cost effective for institutions. And I think we're going to see some, let's say everything returns to whatever the new normal is and a vaccine comes out and people are starting to travel again. I still think virtual conferences are going to be fairly prevalent, you know, intermixed with in-person events as well, not only because you can do more of them and they're, you know, you reduce all that travel, but the other little dirty secret about this COVID problem is the budgetary cuts that everybody's receiving. And so when travel limitations are there, even if it's all safe and everybody can go places, you know, they may not have the budget to be able to do that. So I'm finding that the silver lining of a virtual thing like this is that we get to see more people that might not have otherwise been able to pay for the registration and actually travel somewhere. So it's, you know, it's kind of a mix.
Good question, Maria. Thanks, Kelly. I think it's been very valuable to have you in this space as a sponsor that can contribute and at least give us some idea of what you're experiencing on your end. So thank you for your comments and for your thoughts. That's been very helpful. So I'm going to pivot now. That's my favorite word of the day, by the way. Pivot. We're going to pivot. I'm going to pivot to Jake, and Jake is going to be able to facilitate a different type of questions for the group, still kind of keeping on the theme of a virtual connection. So it's a great segue. So Jake, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. So great to see you. As I said earlier, I love all of my people at Michigan State University, and I love working with them and seeing them all day, every day. But it's so nice to see all of your faces, and it's such a great refresh for me. I hope everybody is well before we jump into things. Obviously, such a crazy time. I am one of those people who, my wife's at home working. I have 2 kids at home doing online school, and so had to up my internet to the top level and make sure that we had bandwidth to support 4 videos going at once. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with that type of scenario. And if I have a kid walk in, it could happen. I know you guys will forgive that because you're probably used to that too. So again, great to see you. And thanks again, Shanna. We are absolutely talking about very relevant topics here. And we were very purposeful and thoughtful as we were putting together some of the questions and topics. And so our second discussion point revolves around, you know, board roles and virtual connections, very specific to social media, chapter websites, other online communities that we have. So our first question along those lines is, what steps have you taken, whether it be in board assignments, board roles, to ensure that social media, your chapter websites, or your online communities, or all of the above, are a priority item? Who's willing to jump in first? I'm used to Microsoft Teams, so I don't know. I'm used to a hand raise or those types of things. I don't think that exists on Zoom, but. Anyone with a board assignment or role specific to social media, websites, online communities?
Yeah, this is Adrian in Indianapolis. We do have, we specified that one of our member at large positions would be responsible for marketing and communication. And so that person, though our social media presence is probably not what it could be, but we do have a role dedicated to make, you know, anytime we need to communicate with chapter members to get information out about upcoming events or anything like that, we do go to that person. That person's also responsible for any communication that we need to send via the national website. So the national processes, I should say. So we do have a person on our board dedicated, a role on our board dedicated to that.
Now, is that fairly new for you guys?
No, we've had it for the last 3 years.
All right, and do you guys actually do a position description for that, and with expectations or those types of things, you know, getting to our performance management roots here in HR?
Yes, so each of our roles on our board does have a description. And that one specifically for the member at large, it has, for the member at large, specific to marketing communication, it does have a role description.
Awesome. So those of you who might not have it, I'm sure you could reach out, and I'm sure the Indiana chapter would be willing to share. Anyone else?
We've heard from some of the other chapters that Beth and I have talked with this week that they've identified committee positions to serve in some of these, especially the social media seems to be a popular one, pulling in some of the younger professionals. And even I think some of the folks this morning in the southern region mentioned that they have HR interns and other HR students who are either working in their HR offices or are studying HR on their campuses. They kind of recruit those folks to sort of drive some of that social media and some of these other communication components with guidance from the board. So that's one option that we've heard, or one structure that has worked well for some.
Excellent. Thanks, Julie. You know, that's, you know, sort of the second part to that question is, if you don't have a specific role dedicated on the board, are you using some sort of other strategy or avenue, such as a committee that you mentioned?
The Minnesota chapter has a specific role. It's an at-large role, but it's a communications officer, Jessica McCann, who's on the call. Jessica also posted something in the chat about driving interest and engagement with your websites. So we're always eager to hear about those ideas. The other thing that we are just getting launched is CUPA Connect for the Minnesota chapter. So we're in infancy, we're getting that going, but that's really exciting. As far as social media, we do have a LinkedIn page, but it's not super active, and that's the extent. I like the idea of engaging an HR student to maybe manage that.
So it's a great point also in thinking about when we have these dedicated roles or even a committee to work on these things. Most, if not all of us, have full-time jobs and skill sets in human resources, not communications, not marketing. So how are some of you handling that when you're building out roles and you're trying to get people to fulfill some of those roles, where most of us are certainly from an HR background? Maybe you get lucky and somebody has that background. What are some of your ideas and thoughts on that?
I'm going to flip the question a little bit, Jake, and throw out there, have we or have you had any interest in some of your team members, now that we've been forced to be much more remote and accommodating, that have an interest in social media or online forums or online communications? Have you encouraged your staff to become more effective or increase their knowledge in social media or chat boxes to further your work? And if so, how does that how could possibly impact your role with CUPA?
I see Maria says that they've used member connections, such as spouses or others, to help with tech and design and so forth. But excellent question, Darren.
Something
go ahead, Connie.
Oh, sorry. Our institution uses a program, Cisco Jabber, and so you can tap back and forth and increase communication that way. It's just always on your computer.
I was going to, Molly Miller, don't kill me. I was going to give a shout out to the Ohio chapter, because one thing that they do really well is their LinkedIn. And just like whenever they have events, they're taking pictures, they're putting stuff out there as it's going on. I know Kelly, because he's located in Ohio, attends a lot of their events. And yeah, Molly, do you want to talk a little bit about your social media presence and what you guys do in Ohio?
I would love to, but I'm embarrassed to admit that I don't personally do social media, and so I didn't know they were doing that. So I would say that I would need to check that out. So maybe you can talk more about it.
Yeah, I would tell you that it's amazing. Yeah, and because for your fall and your spring, well, your fall conference last year and the spring conference before, it was crazy because I started getting like notifications about Ohio spring conference is coming up. Don't, hashtag, and it had the Ohio CUPA. So yeah, and I'm trying to remember which one.
Well, I know we do have a role dedicated to technology and communication, so that definitely helps that. And we have a board of people who have been a part of the CUPA chapter for Ohio for a number of years, and so it's a pretty strong chapter. And they do a lot of social media. So yeah, I'm not surprised that that is an active thing for them. So.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Even if you can engage your, like with your hashtag, like let's hashtag this and put it out there, even on Twitter. That's a good way just to get everyone that's involved in attending your conferences too, to help out with your chapter's social media presence. So, and it just kind of, the cool thing that I liked about Ohio is, like, as it got closer, there kept being little messages, like reminders about get excited about it. And it just kind of built up, that excitement and anticipation for that event. So yes, go talk to the rest of your team and come back to us next month. That's what I'm going to hand off to you to promise to do.
Well, thanks a lot, Heather. I definitely will.
And I'll owe you a drink next time I see you.
Heather, we'll adopt you for all of your great promotional ideas.
All right.
Yes, I have to thank you, Heather. I mean, the force is strong there. That was a tremendous transition, and we didn't even plan that. The next question was to talk about, the best practices, lessons learned, experiences we've had around some of these online technologies, such as social media, website, online communities. And so thank you for that great telekinesis and the transition there for us. That's a great
that's
example.
going to cost you, Jake. That's not free. That's going to cost you.
All right. Yeah. I'll get you next time. Are there any other examples, whether it be social media, your website, online communities, things that you've found have worked really well, or on the contrary, things that you sort of stepped in it and you'd want others to know so they don't have the same misfortune?
Hey, Jake, this is Beth. I'm going to speak up and add, Julie quite often reads my mind. It's really scary sometimes, but she was answering in the chat box about, making sure your website is updated and has the information out there. So I would encourage you as a board to take a few minutes and go to your chapter website and think of yourself as someone who knows nothing about your chapter. What are they seeing? Do you have information out there who they can contact if they have a question? Is your event information up to date? Just things like that. Just look at it through the eyes of someone who is, maybe they stumbled across your website, or someone forwarded an email to them and they're there to check it out. What does your website look like? Because having a robust and informative website is going to help with that engagement, so people know how they can participate, when the next event is, who they can contact if they have questions, or if they're interested in serving. Make sure that you have that information out there as well, and that will help.
Yeah, thanks so much, Beth. It's a great point and something, we always struggled with when I was on the Michigan chapter board was having a robust website. We all sort of agreed, well, it could be a lot better, but how do we actually do that? And so that's an excellent point. And certainly the technology is getting better and easier to use these days. So that certainly helps. Do we have any other best practices around social media use or website that you're really proud of, or any lessons learned?
Hey everyone, this is Justin. One thought that, so I came from the Midwest region from a different region, and I served in a state chapter. And one thing that we did when we struggled with our website and none of us were tech savvy at all. One thing that we did is we actually went to a couple professors that we knew in the business school and at our university, and they knew some students who are like they're like wizards at websites. So we asked them to take a look at this. They just revamped it for us, and we gave them credit on our website, and so they could actually, someone put it on their resume that they were actually they helped CUPA-HR with like their website. So it really got students interested. So just a thought that if you're really looking for, just know that even on your own campus, if you have resources, that students are always willing to help out. And they were both HR students, funny enough, that helped us with our website. So it's a great way to kind of continue the pipeline. So just a thought if you're looking for some additional ways that you can get involved with.
That's a great suggestion, Justin.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's an awesome idea. And beyond just websites, think about using students and those resources on campus for many of the different challenges that we face. Any other things that you guys would want to share on social media or websites?
Jacob, I'll pass along a hint that we do at Kansas State University, and I think that the Kansas chapter has done this as well with their social media. But we utilize, it's a website called Hootsuite. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. It's just HOOT and then Suite SUITE. And you can schedule tweets and social media content in advance, which is really handy because I know if you're like me with social media, sometimes I remember it and then I'll go a few days and then I remember it again and then I'll go a few days. But to stay on top of it is kind of the biggest challenge and struggle. So you can actually schedule content out for months in advance. And for some of our Twitter and Facebook pages that we've scheduled content out right now through December. And so we'll just capitalize on like the timing of the year, and we'll promote different resources that we have at our institution, or as a chapter, you could do that too, to schedule some of those out. And that might be also something that you could task a student with as well for maybe an internship idea with a business student or someone that might be interested. So might be a resource you want to look into.
That's great. Thanks so much, Shanna, for sharing.
Yeah, Jacob, if I could just tag on to that, Shanna, I've used Hootsuite a lot, and there are some other platforms that do similar things. One thing to keep in mind that sort of, Jacob, you mentioned sort of when have you stepped in it and then had to sort of backpedal. Those are great tools and they can really help with efficiency. But in the world of 2020 right now, where crazy things are happening all the time, and whether there's a wildfire in your state or a tornado or some other big COVID problem or something political happens, you have to be careful about what you have scheduled and to pay attention and have someone who can sort of quickly pivot and log in to stop something from going out. If you're sending out, we're so excited about the conference in 2 weeks, and there was just a devastating tornado in your state, that's probably going to look a little tone deaf. So the wonderful efficiency comes with great responsibility to make sure that you're staying on top of that as well. Because I've been in a position where we've forgotten to do that, and it definitely does not look good.
Yeah, thanks. And it's easy to do. I mean, you've been working for so long and so hard on a certain event or project, whatever it may be, and it's very easy to put that out and not see the blinders there. All right, last call for social media or websites. And I do have one more question after this. So we can come back to that, or you can just jump in whenever on that one. All right, so the last question for this section revolves around online communities. And so, of course, a tremendous time to be having that conversation. Online communities are not new for us. We've always had them. I don't know that many of us have done a lot or done what we would consider a great job with those. I would be very interested if there's a chapter that feels like, hey, no, we've done an awesome job with our online community. We have great engagement and great connectivity. If so, please share, what are you doing? Those of you who may feel the other way, how are you strategizing, especially in light of our current circumstances, to get more engagement in your online communities and more connectivity throughout the year?
Hey, Jake, I'm going to jump in real quickly too and add, that's one of the things that I've been working on, and I'm going to share a lot more information next month with our chapters, the ones who have the online communities. I've been spending some time and pulling some reports, and I'm able to look at some metrics. And so I want to share those with each of the online communities so the chapters can see how many members they have, how many posts they average throughout the year. And that will help them think about how they want to move forward. We certainly want to celebrate what they're doing great, and then look at other opportunities to maybe grow their community. And if someone is interested in starting an online community, such as I know the Minnesota chapter is looking or starting that, we have that option in the toolkit, and I'll share that resource when we wrap up here. And I'm going to hop online and show everyone the toolkit. So I will throw that out there. Don't despair if your community's not doing well. It's okay, but we're going to work with you this year to get it back up and going.
Thanks, Beth. Appreciate that. Is there anybody who feels that they're getting great engagement in their online community, or anybody that's planned a strategy already to improve that?
This is Heather from Wisconsin.
Oh, go ahead, Heather.
Sorry.
You're fine.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry. Okay, so last year we made a really great attempt at trying to engage the members of the state of Wisconsin. And so we scheduled out our conversations for the entire year. So we had different themes each month, and then we put a board member in charge of an initial post, and then we had folks responsible for the response post. So in an attempt to create other engagement and excitement within the state of Wisconsin, we started our conversations amongst our board members. And so they were always timely, right? Like in the midst of things that were happening, Title IX changes, or I'm not really thinking of good examples right now, but they were always something that was happening within the current situation that we were in. So really great intentions. We had planned out the whole map for the year, and then it ended up just being our board members talking to each other. So so I don't know that it would be, I would consider that a colossal fail. It was a great attempt, and we were really hopeful that people would engage and participate. What we did find was more people were using it to post jobs, which I guess is okay because they're at least getting to the platform. So definitely something to kind of revisit to figure out how we can continue that and build upon that. But I think we were really, really hopeful and excited that it was going to take off and fly, and it didn't, but that's okay. So
I think part of that may be the timing, but now, speaking of timing, it might be a great time to do that again.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's certainly a great idea. And maybe now you incorporate video sessions into that. Maybe people are going to be more inclined to do that. They're so used to now every day jumping on video sessions, and it'd be, again, much like this is, it's something different and something to take you away from your day-to-day grind. And if you had targeted topics, or even if you had, casual conversation just to connect with peers from across the state, maybe something like that would be very welcomed and enjoyed by people.
I was just going to mention, I felt like for some of the communities, CUPA communities I'm in, right when all this kind of hit back in the spring. And I thought, wow, because there were quite a few questions going around. So, and I was grateful because a lot of the questions that were being asked were questions I had. So it was extremely helpful. So yeah, maybe now is the time to kind of revisit and try to throw some things out there.
Yeah, we've definitely had an increase in overall activity across the entire CUPA-HR Connect platform. The last couple weeks, we've dipped a little, I think, as students are coming back and things are a little hectic for everyone, but we expect that that will pick up again. So it may be a good time to kind of try again. And Jacob, I love the suggestion of sort of thinking about what else could you share within the platform. If you do have one of the communities within Connect, you can share things like YouTube links. So if you have a recording from a Zoom video call that you did and you want to post on YouTube and share that link, people can share documents. So you can kind of create a file structure for sample policies, templates, or you know, if you put a call out for facial covering policies on campus, and then and share that with folks. All of those tools within that are a good way to sort of let people share and kind of figure out what do people really need, and then hopefully those folks will come. And I will say we've one of the tactics that we've used within the national office for some of the larger spaces that we have the general discussion and our data user group is to use committees. So to get folks who are more kind of an ad hoc volunteer basis to kind of commit to participating and asking questions and sharing resources within your communities, so that it's not just your board having conversations, and then you kind of create those champions and people get to feel like they're really contributing. And then you kind of moving to our next conversation topic when we get there, get to start building your pipeline of engaged members who can move into leadership positions. So we found that to be a really good strategy in a lot of ways.
Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing. That's wonderful. Are there any last thoughts anybody has on social media, your websites, online communities? Well, I will take the opportunity then to transition to my esteemed colleague, the past chair of the Midwest Region Board, Executive Director of Human Resources at Ivy Tech Community College, the wonderfully famous Heather Hart. Please take over.
I told Jake when we were talking through that he had to give me a wonderful introduction, and you did a great job. So I owe you one. Yes. And
well, that was just me giving it back to you. So now we're even.
All right. So, and my chat box facilitators and partners in crime during this will be Renee Hiller and Ruth Appleton. And I just want to say, ladies, as you're looking at the chat, if there are any questions, feel free to jump right in there, comments, or any great ideas that I'm missing that I can't see because I'm going to be managing this discussion. So we are going to talk about kind of what steps everyone has taken with their boards as far as making sure you have a diverse board, as far as institutions, you know, gender diversity and race and ethnicity, years in HR. So I know, Jacqueline, you mentioned that your Minnesota chapter was small but mighty for a while, and now you have moved to a larger group. So I will pick on you and ask you, not really pick on you, but ask you to kind of share a little bit more on that here in a minute. But I was also going to ask Adrian Preddy from Indiana, the Indiana chapter, because I know, Adrian, you all have done a lot too as far as building your board up and making sure that you have institutions of different sizes, and just really done a lot with your board as far as development and planning. So could you speak to that a little bit with the group?
Yeah, so so I've been on the board, I think 3 or 4 years now, 4 or 5, a long time.
Okay.
This is the beginning of my second year as president, and so I'll be moving into a different role at some point. But yeah, our board I think that we've developed quite a bit over the several years that I've been involved from member to now president. We do have I think that our representation of colleges and universities in the area is okay. It could be better. We tend to be heavy with the larger institutions like Ivy Tech and IU and IUPUI because that's who's right there in the city and are, able to easily access us and get, we can, that group of professionals can get together the easiest. What we try to do is whenever we have a captive audience, we're always letting people know that the board is always looking for new members because we want to try to groom people before everyone transitions off of the board. So for example, at our virtual event in August, we were sure to announce the fact that, several board positions would be coming to the end of their term next June. And so we were encouraging people with that broad of an audience to ask any of us questions. We made sure to give our contact information so they could learn about, what it's like to be a board member, what our responsibilities are, what the time commitment is, that kind of thing. And so we also, when we were able to be in person, we always tried to move our spring conference around to different campuses. We didn't just keep it at one location because we thought, okay, if we go to different campuses, we might be able to recruit at least one person from that HR team to join us in our endeavors. So I think that we still have room for growth when it comes to getting people from a few more campuses to join, or a few more college institutions to join our board. But I think that we're doing pretty well considering that we have, all of our positions on our board filled.
And so once you have your board filled, what are you doing with your board members to kind of look to the future and plan? Right. Yeah, so not last August, a year ago in August, we held our retreat. We typically have a retreat every August, face-to-face retreat, half day, sometimes full day. I think last August the 5th, I think it was almost a full day, probably 6 hours of a day. And we did strategic planning. We talked about everything. We started with the roles that were, that people had, making sure that everyone understood exactly what their role was and what the expectation of them in that role was. And everyone was hearing it at the same time. So there was no confusion about who did what. So no one stepping on anyone's toes. We talked about, we brainstormed ideas about what we wanted to do over the next year. So we set up a timeline. We made a timeline and planned out what we would do, when we would do it, and how we would do it, including who's responsible for what. So what I found is that if you get people on the board and then get them engaged immediately, give them or let them choose some sort of task that they can buy into, then they stay. And so we haven't had anyone from last year until this year, we haven't had, other than someone who was moving away, we haven't had anyone leave the board because they're engaged and they're all involved. So no one's able to say I didn't have anything to do. Even on our virtual call-in this August, in our virtual conference, everyone had a role. I don't think there was any board member who didn't have a role, even if it was, you're in charge of the chat box, you're in charge of holding on to this person's presentation in case anything happens. Everybody had a role. So just making sure that you get them engaged and not getting them on the board and then not giving them something to do. Thank you. So now I want to go back to Jacqueline, and I just want to talk a little bit about, so you've done a great job. You've built up, and you said that you had your retreat. So when you were at your retreat this year, what kind of things or what focus did you put, Jacqueline, or anyone on your team, actually, if you want to speak to, what did you all talk about as far as next level succession planning with your board, if you wanted to speak to that?
Sure. Our all-day retreat, and my team can jump in too. So our all-day retreat, one of the things we did focus on was succession planning and talking about, so we not only had identified at that retreat, not only our president-elect, but our president-elect. So we knew like who was going to be even coming after that, which was great. And then that's when we determined that we would again replicate our fall strategic summit again. So we, again, for events and that type of thing too. So we did a whole lot of planning. Sounds like just a lot like Adrienne. So it's a great time to get together and do that. We actually have now determined at that planning session as well that we'd like to open it up for a couple more folks to join our board, to even expand a little further. And so we were really looking at all kinds of factors. We'd really like to, our ratio of public to private schools is probably a little bit heavier to the public university kind of setting, and so we'd like to get more of the private and or associate degree kind of colleges involved. So we are looking at that piece. Also, we're looking at kind of when we interviewed these folks, it was really, really helpful because of those personal interests that they have too, right? If someone's just joining to build their resume, like, I mean, yes, that's part of it, but that shouldn't be the main motivator, right? That's just not going to cut it. And so really learning more about these folks as individuals has really helped. Also, we really got to the individual level as well to learn, for example, we reached out to our wildfire participant this year. Matt is on the call, I believe. And of course, he's not an official member of the board, but we said, hey, if you're wanting to just learn how the board works and join us when you're able for our meetings and get involved when you can. And again, we know wildfire comes first, but that's a great inroads then to him potentially being on the board for a future role after wildfire is done, such as Maria, Exhibit A. So we're so glad that she's on our board. We're looking at the differentiation. We have a lot, we are also more like Twin Cities focused of schools. Maria is probably our one outlier on the board, and it is a little bit more difficult because she can't join us in person as often, but now with our virtual world, it doesn't even matter as much, as she mentioned too. But we also were looking at that piece, like how many outstate folks can we have on the board without kind of losing some of that continuity or some of that ability to get together and gather. So all of those things are jumping in. Also, our emerging leader, Carolyn, is also still involved, again, as much as she can, knowing that emerging leaders comes first. So we want to keep those people involved. We actually had a few folks that even applied for emerging leader and applied for wildfire and didn't get accepted, but we reached out to them to say, hey, can you be, or do you want to be a part of, you know, a different way to get involved with CUPA-HR that might be different than what you had originally intended. So anyway, we really are trying to get creative and include as many folks and learn more about them. And even if they can't join the board, that they might be willing to help out with the next event or, like I said, join meetings to understand and learn about the board. So that's what we're kind of looking at, all those different things.
Thank you. That's great, great stuff. And I know I'm going to open it up to some other chapters, not picking on Michigan, but I know Michigan, you've done some work too this past year and had overcame some challenges and had some really great successes. But I'm going to open it up. If anyone else, what are you doing as far as ensuring that your board is diverse, as far as who's on your board with as far as representation from the different schools, like Jacqueline was talking about, the publics and the privates, and what are some other chapters doing? And if anyone wants to speak up about Michigan, that'd be great too, because I know you guys did a lot of hard work this past year.
Natalie, you want to take this one first, or should I do it?
No, sure, I can talk. So I got involved with the Michigan chapter after last year's national conference. I was interested in getting more involved, and I had actually reached out to Jake because I knew he had been a past president of the Michigan board. Just wanted to see what opportunities there were. And then in January, ish, I got a note from Jake saying that they had like mid-year opportunity open up for the president-elect and asked if I was interested in that opportunity. So I jumped on that, and through that then got involved with the Emerging Leader Program, and through that we were able to see some others in Michigan that I think, who had mentioned they were reaching out to wildfire and emerging leader folks. Was that you, Jacqueline? Yeah, so we did the same thing for that. We had reached out to folks that had expressed interest in those programs. And nicely enough, it was at other institutions that we didn't have representation on our board already. So we were able to diversify who all sits on our board, because previously it was a lot of our Southeast Michigan folks in like kind of that Detroit and broader area. That's where U of M and MSU are located, as well as Wayne State, and they've historically had a lot of board representation, and so we were able to diversify that with Kendra joining us from CMU, and then I don't know if Emily's here today, but Emily from Saginaw Valley this year. So, and then with me joining from Grand Valley, so we now have a much more cross-functional representation, which is really nice. And so I think we're trying to leverage that network to be able to build our board in a way that continues that representation as we move forward. So we've kind of gotten to a place that I think we have a nice broad reach around the state, and then we can hopefully draw from that to kind of continue on as we plan our conferences and move forward with board service. So.
Joe, did you want to add anything?
Not necessarily directly. I actually wanted to also ask this of our president-elect, Natalie Brown, just because I also wanted to just ask if it's possible how you got approached from because this kind of taps into the succession planning standpoint, and how you got to be kind of involved with our board, because it was, I think, kind of a multi-step process. If you're okay to talk about it.
So when I started at U of M in 2018, I talked with a number of people who had been like in my role or higher ups, just seeking advice. And a lot of them mentioned, you know, participating in the CUPA chapter would be helpful. And so I reached out to, I want to say it must have been Heidi or Carolyn, to ask what was available to volunteer in. And so I volunteered. We were actually putting on the conference that year. So I joined up as a volunteer. And then Heidi had mentioned that there would be board roles available. And so I asked her about that, and I missed the first year. But the second year, when I saw openings, I applied, and then Heidi reached out to me and we had a conversation about the president-elect position. So I would say it's just a lot of communication. Sometimes people who start, they don't know what is available for them to do. And so the more we communicate with people, you know, not necessarily the higher ups or, you know, executives, but when we communicate with you know, HR business partners and HR assistants, you know, would you like to get involved? Would you like to volunteer? And then they start to see what is available for them.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. And I was going to mention, oh, go ahead, Heather. Go right ahead.
Interrupting you. I'm
no, you're good. It's the Heathers. We're right in sync with one another. That's what it is. You go right ahead.
I'll go with that. So I was introduced to the Wisconsin board a few years back as I was on the wildfire program. And so I think at that time I may have been one of the only private schools that was kind of helping out. I served as a committee member on with our conference planning committee for the board. And so then I transitioned into a role. But I think one of the goals of Wisconsin is always to find that balance of private, tech, and public schools. And I feel good. We're finally there. And I think we've got a good representation of the balance. So we currently have 2 tech school representatives, public schools, and then myself as a private, but we definitely need to add another private school in there to join the clan. But I think the most important thing is that we were intentional in our recruitment efforts. And so, right, like picking through the list of, right, I think that's helpful feedback. So the list of the folks that were either wildfire emerging leaders, or even we'll rotate our conferences. I think Adrian mentioned that like rotating the conferences to different locations to be able to make the connections and new connections. I think that's so critical to being able to find and connect with new members. So we're super excited that we have 2 tech school representatives on our board, because that just gives us a different perspective, especially for things that we don't think about that are impacting them, to be able to better serve those institutions in our state. So I'm hopeful that we'll continue to be mindful as we are helping recruit for our board members, but I think that has been super helpful just knowing that as we plan that along the way. So.
Yeah, that's good. The only thing I was going to mention was Andy did say that sometimes it's nice to have just kind of informal get-togethers with your boards. And that's just kind of, especially now, everything's so stressful. And we do that on the Midwest board. Sometimes if one of us just is really stressed, we'll say, let's just have kind of a get-together so we can Zoom together, it's a different Zoom. It's more fun than your typical Zoom, but we'll have a glass of wine and we'll laugh and we'll tell stories. And, you know, like Connie's daughter was on our last Zoom with us. So it was just kind of, it's just kind of fun. And I would just say that's a great way to build your relationships and get to know one another. And it's a good way to see like what someone is interested maybe with their future plans. But sometimes you get the most insight into your team members when you have those informal get-togethers. So, and let's face it, we need to laugh and have fun right now because it's so serious.
I have to say, you know, kudos to Darren. He was being very supportive and knew that those of us in Wisconsin were going through a hard time, and he just reached out, and he and I just had a one-on-one. So if you see one of your colleagues just kind of having a hard time, or you know they're probably having a hard day, just schedule a little time to help either blow off steam or to say, hey, I'm here. We went through this last month. Whatever it is just kind of give your board member colleagues that little boost, because I can tell you it made a difference to me. And then with our whole board getting together on a Sunday night to just chat, and we got to meet Darren's wife and his daughter, and my daughter was on, and it just kind of brings us all together. I mean, we consider each other family already, but just to share that. And also just to my board, my daughter did get the job.
Oh, yay, good. Yes.
Her dream job.
Good news. Well, for my last really quick, believe it or not, I just have a few more minutes. I know that Justin mentioned about utilizing our students, and that is a great idea because, you know, they are our future. And it reminds me, I was in camp a long time ago, and the Whitney Houston song, remember, what is it, like the Children Are Our Future song? That was like the big camp song that year. So it takes me back when I'm saying this. But anyhow, these students are our future. So if any of you are utilizing your business students, or are you utilizing your students and engaging with students for your chapters? And if so, can you share some of that with us? I see a few nods, so that means I should, whoever wants to be brave and unmute, feel free, jump right in there.
All right, I'll jump in. I'm afraid to talk. I wish my rest of my board would be talking. We have used students quite a bit for our like marketing materials for our conferences and our communication pieces, where they can actually pull together not only the pieces to go before we send them out, but also we the actual pieces to hand out, like at the conference, like with the agenda and those kinds of things last year. Now it's a little bit different this year with the virtual, but we definitely got them involved and helped them pull some of those pieces together. And we've typically used student workers for whichever institutions had students available that could work on those things. And many times if they're working in the HR department, they have an interest in HR or business or something like that. So definitely a resume builder for them too.
And just so you know, Jacqueline, don't feel bad because your team says you're doing a great job. Jessica said, you just go right ahead. You can answer all those questions.
We have actually debated about how we could potentially get a student involved with our board too. So we're grappling with how to do that. So I'd love to hear ideas on that piece too. Thanks.
Does anyone have students involved with their boards right now? No.
So we don't currently, we've talked about, and our board still needs to decide where we're going to land with this, but we've talked about either one of our at-large members kind of spearheading social media type engagement, or I regularly have a student intern that works for me in my role. And so we've talked about leveraging that student intern that I will have to be able to assist us with social media kind of presence. So we have to kind of decide where that's sitting as a board. It's still in discussion, but it's something we've talked about. And so if we utilize a student in that capacity, that's something we bring them in on.
And like Kelly said, with his Siegel colleagues, they all want to get in higher ed, right? Because it's so fun. So when these students hang out with we higher ed HR individuals, I mean, then this will be their dream career moving forward, I'm sure, because we're so fun. So, all right, Beth, I promised you also a wonderful handoff. So I am going to hand this off to the amazing Beth Humphrey so she can share all of her wisdom that she has. Whenever I have questions and something, Beth is my go-to, with Julie right there with her, but Beth is definitely a go-to, and if she does not have the answer, which 99.9% of the time she does, she will get the answer. So I will hand it off to the lovely Beth Humphrey.
Oh, thank you. Now the pressure's on. See, if I screw up, then it's going to look really bad. I do want to thank you all so much for taking the time today to join us. I know you are extremely busy, and as Julie had mentioned earlier, you know, students are coming back on campus. You yourself may be coming back on campus. So I really appreciate not only the support that you offer to CUPA-HR, but the support that you offer to your colleagues as well. So I wanted to touch real quickly on some of the resources that we have available in the toolkit. Can everyone see the CUPA-HR website now? Okay, great. So for those of you who are new to your service role and maybe you haven't had a chance to work with your board to do your onboarding, I do want to mention real quickly, we do have resources online for our chapter leaders. So if you look under the For Volunteer section, you'll notice that we have the Region and Chapter Leaders Toolkit. For those of you who are not new, if you're just seeing this, recently we've done an upgrade, so things do look a little different here. A few things I want to point out: the virtual event support that we offer now from the national office. We can help your chapter with your virtual event. We can host it through Zoom. We have two options out here, just real quickly, a full support or a platform only support. I encourage you to go out here and check this out and see if that's something that we can partner with your chapter to help you with your virtual events. Another thing I want to point out is the chapter assessment and action plan checklist. So if you've attended previous ALPs, then you've probably seen the assessment and action plan that we have for our chapters. It's just a checklist that we've created based on the Chapter Excellence Award criteria. We've used that information to compile a checklist that your chapter board can download and work on together for the year. Think about the action items and plans that you want to accomplish. And then it's a great tool to share with your region board representative. so that they're aware of where you are in the steps and what they can do to offer to help. So I encourage you, when we finish the call today or next week when your board gets together, to print out this plan and talk about it together and think about what you can work on together as a board to improve your chapter or continue the great work that you are doing. So I know I've kind of zipped through things here, but I do encourage you to go out here and look at the toolkit. As Heather said, I am always happy to help you. Feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm happy to walk through anything with you, or if it's something that I don't know, then I'll certainly find someone who does. So I want to make your job as a chapter leader as easy as possible. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Darren and let him wrap things up for us.
Thanks, Beth, and all the board members and Kelly and all of the chapter leaders for your participation today. As we move forward and as you move forward with your chapters, I hope you found this a valuable experience, the conversation. I know I did. I want to reinforce the value that CUPA has and can provide you, not only through the Midwest chapter or your local chapters, but also through national connections. And really it is those connections that we make both at the conferences, whether they're virtual or in person. I know for me, it's been a valuable tool. It's the conferences themselves have been energizing and really helped me move forward with both assisting other chapters as well as myself, build upon my HR knowledge. And it is those connections, and I have a few things here. Kelly, you may want to close your eyes because all of my SIPs and stuff is down in my kitchen, but I have my TIAA ball and my Page Up ball. It's it's those connections that you make through CUPA that are, to me, that are just invaluable. And it's a lot of times what we miss in a virtual event is those side conversations, those casual conversations, or those water cooler type conversations, whether it be in our office or in a virtual event. So I encourage each and every one of you to really reach out if you need help. For me, Connie and I kind of went through similar situations that were difficult for us. So it was for me to reach out to Connie and just check in, say, hey, I'm here for you. Are you okay? We then scheduled as a board happy hour, social hour on a Sunday. And it was really uplifting. And I think we both came out of it in much better spirits. And so I encourage that among each and every one of you and your boards is, set aside time just to talk about life events and what's happening, and not just everything that is focused on CUPA itself or your role as an HR professional, because we're all here to support each and every one of you as well. You can all reach out to me as well, and I'd be happy to talk. So with that, I will wrap it up. Thank you very much for your participation. I appreciate it. And thank you, Beth, and the National Board and the National Board employees there. Your work and your commitment to the organization is just outstanding. Always has been. So thank you very much. With that, we can wrap it up.
Great job, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone. Go Browns, Kelly.
Go Browns.
Great to
Thank
see you
you.
all.
Bye.
Bye.